As fire and fury dominates headlines in Washington and beyond, President Trump is unleashing on the book's author over this controversial claim.
One of the overarching themes is that, according to your reporting, everyone around the president, senior advisors, family members, every single one of them questions his intelligence and fitness for office.
Let me put a marker in the sand here. 100% of the people around him.
Well, that set off a barrage of presidential tweets earlier this morning, with the president declaring that mental stability is one of his greatest assets. Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee of Michigan is joining us now. Congressman, thank you for being here. Earlier this week, you said Republicans need to stand up to the president, as his actions regarding Steve Bannon and his taunting of Kim Jong-un put the country in jeopardy. How concerned are you about the fallout of this book and the president's response?
Well, I'm concerned about the response. First of all, in my lifetime, people who have to say they're smart or say they're stable are not usually smart or stable. It's almost as if the president has to say he's not a crook. And what did we find out about that statement a few decades ago? This is a dangerous time, and it's dangerous because Congress has authority that it ought to exercise to rein in this president. And what I worry about is that privately you hear Republicans, I do all the time, saying many of the same things that we hear in this book, but publicly and officially they are falling all over themselves to protect this president from legitimate inquiry and from legitimate oversight, and that is very dangerous for this country.
Why?
Well, it's dangerous because our system of government is one that assumes that one branch will check the power of another. And the decisions that the president can make are consequential. His behavior is consequential. And to have Congress simply sit back and say, oh, that's Trump being Trump. No, it's not. It's the President of the United States challenging the interests of the American people and destabilizing the conditions on the globe. It's not Trump being Trump. He's the president. He ought to behave like the president. I'm not sure he's capable of it.
Now, we're learning a dozen lawmakers from both the House and the Senate met with a Yale psychiatrist last month due to concerns over President Trump's mental health. I'm curious if you were one of them.
No, I was not. I have not been involved in that. And, you know, I understand the interest in it. But my concern is that a lot of this obsession about the president's capabilities diverts us away from the work that we ought to be doing. It will reveal itself, and I'm confident that our constitutional form of government can overcome any sort of deficiency, whether it's a serious problem with the president's mental state or just bad decisions that he makes because he makes bad decisions. I'm hopeful that we can focus on the work that we ought to be doing and not be drawn into a whole lot of discussions around the town that are interesting here in Washington, but don't address the real serious problems that we face in this country.
Now, we do know some parts of this Wolf book are not true. Do you think the president has been given a fair shake?
Well, here's the thing. I don't really think folks ought to judge the president based on the contents of this book. I don't think that's fair. I think we can judge the president based on what we know he says and does on the record or in meetings where we can witness his behavior. And honestly, for me, that's enough to come to certain conclusions about this president's preparedness for the job. But, you know, these books are interesting, but I don't know that much about Mr. Wolf. I don't know that we ought to spend a lot of time in Congress. I heard somebody's going to send every member of Congress a book. I'd rather that they send every member of Congress a Constitution and have each one of them read that. If they read the Constitution, they wouldn't have to read this book.
Let's turn to the upcoming year and talk a little bit about policy and what Americans can expect in terms of the work you're doing in Congress. I want you to listen to something that Republican leaders said today at Camp David.
We hope that 2018 will be a year of more bipartisan cooperation.
We think this agenda is one that will appeal to everyone in between Democrats and Republicans, independents.
The president predicted that infrastructure would be one issue that would bring two sides together. Do you agree?
Well, I think it has the possibility, but when I hear Speaker Ryan or Leader McConnell say those sorts of things about bipartisanship on whether it's infrastructure or another issue, I just think to myself, give me a break. You wrote a tax bill in private and dumped it on the floor of the House and the Senate 48 hours before you asked legislators to vote yes or no on it. If that's their pattern, whether it's infrastructure or the budget or CHIP or whatever it might be, that's not going to be real bipartisanship. The other concern that I have is that Republicans, I think very irresponsibly, have spent the resources on tax cuts for people at the very top that could have been used for new roads, new bridges, rails, ports, high-speed internet across the country. We still have to fix that problem. But their priorities were very clear. They did not put infrastructure on the table. They put tax cuts that are disproportionately, almost exclusively targeted to people at the very top, and not better roads and bridges and rail systems, not the kind of things that would actually get this economy moving in a sustainable fashion. It was a huge lost opportunity.
Some people could argue these are sour grapes because of how the tax reform went, but I know you are very passionate about CHIP, you're very passionate about the DACA protections. Are you willing to shut down the government over those things?
Well, if the government's shut down, it's because the Republican Congress and the Republican White House can't agree with one another on a spending plan. If they want Democrats to help them keep government open, they can't wait until the last 15 minutes and then turn to us and say, we're not going to deal with any of your priorities. We're not going to deal with DACA, CHIP. We're not going to do anything on infrastructure. But if you don't vote yes, because we can't get Republicans to vote yes, government's going to shut down. That would be the Republicans shutting down the government. If they actually want to do the work, look at, and even if the president wants to talk about infrastructure, like water infrastructure, you know where to find me, Mr. President. Maybe you're watching. You should call. They should really talk to us and not wait until the last minute when their own failure creates the potential of a government shutdown, and then all of a sudden the Democrats are supposed to come to the rescue. They really have some explaining to do when they leave us out of all these conversations and then ask us to save them from themselves.
Well, we understand there's supposed to be a bipartisan meeting with the president. I believe it's on Tuesday, if I recall correctly. Congressman Dan Kildee